Hey guys, it's Lexi and welcome back to my channel. Today I have 10 spooky books to spice up your reading. By spooky, I mean there's like an aura of darkness, there's some intense overtones. I don't know if I'm using that right. It's not going to be a feel-good rom-com. If you're reading like ACOTAR, you wouldn't call it spooky, but if you're reading From Blood and Ash, you kind of would. So take that with a grain of salt because, I mean, besides the fact that all the covers are black, they're definitely not books that you would put in a happy aisle. So From Blood and Ash, Jennifer Armentrout. It is a series. It is one of the first books that I read that kind of got me into reading. There's vampires, werewolves, magic, gods and goddesses, a war brewing. And our main character, Poppy, she's a maiden. She is kind of shrouded in this veil of innocence, of untouchableness. Clearly that's not going to be the case. There's more to her than what meets the eye, and she kind of has to find her own identity. She gets to experience life outside of this veil of innocence. And I will make a disclaimer, this and quite a few of the books I'm gonna reference have spice in it. So if that's not your cup of tea, you may not enjoy these. But I would definitely call this more of a spooky fantasy. Honestly, this needs to be talked about more because Miss Girl, okay, let me not spoil anything, but this should be talked about more. It's one of the books that got me addicted to reading, so I think maybe that's why. I just have so much love for it. The next one is A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. It is a series, and this is a Persephone Hades series with there's a contract that binds her to him. There's love, kidnapping, or I will do anything to protect you. I don't care who I destroy to get there. It's kind of like a modern take on this Greek goddess god scenery. It's definitely dark. It's literally the god of the underworld, but it has a lot of rom-commy moments to it, a lot of romance and some relief, but there's so much tension in this book, and there's a war brewing, of course, so it's not going to be an easy read. Honestly, I think I might want to read this again. Anyways, if you're looking for a sort of darker fantasy series that's not as intense on the violence part, I would recommend this. The next one is Hooked by Emily McIntyre. Warning on the spice level, it is insane. One thing with Emily McIntyre is all of her books in this series, the Never After series, they're all based on Disney villains and characters getting their own shot at love, but dark. So this is about Peter Pan, Wendy, Captain Hook. There's revenge, there's kidnapping, there's love, lots of violence per se. I mean, if you literally read the back, it says, he wants revenge, but he wants her more. That's kind of a dead giveaway. I say this is if you want to get into some darker, spooky, spicy romance books, don't start with this one. Work your way up to it if you don't think you'd be comfortable starting with something like that. But if you want to dip your toe in that realm of crazy spicy books, this is definitely one of them. I feel like at this point, I mentioned this in every video I've ever posted, but One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. Of course the word dark is in the title. That's not why I would consider this a spooky book. It's in this world that's like shrouded in darkness. There's magic, there's possession of a sort, not by like demonic things, but by kings, queens, stuff like that. There's a very slow burn romance. I would not really consider this a spicy book, but you don't need that to enjoy this. This is one of my favorite series of all times. And one of the quotes, it literally talks about how she must unleash her monster within, basically. You don't have monsters within being leashed in the Shatter Me series per se, so this would probably be darker than From Blood and Ash, but I love her. This one I would consider the Six of Crows series in Crooked Kingdom. The reason I consider this kind of more spooky, because I know some people, lots of these themes are not their cup of tea, so they would consider this spooky, so that's why I am, is because it's set in this world of like poverty, of darkness, of crime, and these main characters, a lot of them started as kids in this sort of crime lord aspect environment, and you see how they learn to accept love, how they take the lives of other people, they plan these missions, and I just think it's a really beautifully written dark book in a way that it makes it seem not as dark because you're rooting for the bad guys and they get their way, of course. Does that make sense? So it's like you're in the perspective of these villains, and this is part of the Shadow and Bone series. Shadow and Bone kind of a darker fantasy, but this little off series I would say is more on the spooky end. And honestly, if you don't agree that those are very spooky, the way I think about it is my friend, her sister, she was reading a book with like vampires in it, and she said that it scared her. She does not like stuff like that. She doesn't like any sort of violence, and all these books pretty much have that. So for me, I'm kind of numb to those topics, but I know a lot of people aren't. So that would definitely give these a sort of spooky atmosphere. So the next one is Verity by Colleen Hoover. Before you say anything, I know she's not everyone's biggest cup of tea, but this book is different. It's not one of her romance books. This is honestly, I would say, the one that got me interested in reading mystery thrillers. It is spooky, creepy. I think there were multiple times where I was reading it and I got the shivers because there's like you're being watched, there's a mystery, there's unaliving. It's not even that it's dark in the violence aspect, it's just so unnerving throughout most of the book that it's definitely, I mean, look at the cover too. I was not expecting to enjoy this so much, especially because, like I said, if you've been on any sort of book talk, booktube, Colleen Hoover isn't people's favorite. Disregard all of that, forget what you've heard, just at least read this one. I think it's a great way to get in the mystery thriller realm. It definitely did that for me. Now I want to reread it because I missed that feeling of being creeped out. Next is Miss Bride by Ali Hazelwood. And yes, I know this is kind of a rom-com romance, but like I said before, the aspects of violence, like there's vampires, werewolves, there's trading / hostage situations, unaliving. There's lots of topics that aren't very lighthearted, aren't suited for children per se. There is spice once you get to it. I would say it's one of the more lighthearted, spooky reads. So if you want to slowly make your way into eventually reading like Verity or any of my Frida McFadden books, start with this for sure and then progress. This book is so cute though. It's an easy read. It's different from my little Yours Truly. If I were to hold that up to this, you know what I'm saying? Okay, so the final two spooky books I read on my Kindle. I'll just put it up on the screen. The first one is Gothicana by Runix. I don't know if I'm saying that entirely right. It kind of reminds me of like a Beauty and the Beast situation. There's like a super dark college in this creepy majestic castle thing. There's a lot of unaliving going on throughout the area. There's a huge mystery, secrets of this university. There's a sort of teacher-student situation going on where he's older and he wants to protect her and he's obsessed with her. It is not a lighthearted romance. I know it kind of sounds like that. It's not. There are a lot of dark overtones, a lot of violence. I mean, it's literally called Gothicana. Look at the title. I really enjoyed it. I was kind of nervous about starting it because even the title, I was like, this sounds like something I would title in middle school, which sounds mean, but that's just what I thought. And then I read it and I was like, oh, that ate. But anyways, so I would definitely recommend that. I think it's on the more spookier end of the spectrum of the books that I referenced, but it has a satisfying ending. Now, the last one I'm going to mention is Never Lie by Frida McFadden. Honestly, I could have done all these books about her, but I was like, let me be controlled and just name one of hers. And I picked this one because it was the spookiest in my opinion. A lot of her books are thriller mysteries, and this one I think was the most nerve-wracking. This one had me kind of on the edge of my seat, getting the chills. There's a mystery, haunted house involved. I think it's one of my favorite books from her. I keep saying that about all her books, but honestly, that was one of the first ones I read that had me hooked on Frida McFadden. If you want to start reading thriller mysteries that aren't like the ones I've said before, if you want something a little more spooky-ish, I would start with that one. And like I said, the difference between Never Lie and all her other ones is more of the creepy aspect. I wasn't as creeped out by her other ones. This one I was, To each their own. For me, I've been really into this sort of genre lately. I started out my reading timeline with like romance, comedy, fantasy, lighthearted fantasy, and now I'm here reading like 400-page thrillers that are very fast page turners for me. So these are my 10 spooky books that I would recommend to spice up your reading, including the few that I've read on my Kindle. One thing that you should always keep in mind is you don't have to finish a book. If something makes you uncomfortable, if something gets you creeped out, you can always DNF, do not finish, did not finish. I think That's the problem, is some of these books that I've read on my shelf, I did not enjoy, but I forced myself to read them anyways. And honestly, if I had explored more, I would have found the genre that really speaks to me, i.e. this. And I think I can thank Book Talk for most of these recommendations. Honestly, I would even give a special shout out to the Caraval series. Can you see her? I don't feel like getting it off my bookshelf. If you want something that slowly works its way up to the spooky aspect, that is a great series to start with. And then you can branch off to the Once Upon a Broken Heart, which is more romance fantasy heavy. I would give a special shout out to that, just saying. Alas, that brings me to the end of this video. Maybe you found a book that you're interested in trying next, and I appreciate you sticking around to the end. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!